My name is Somik Lall. I'm a lead economist working in the Africa region of the World Bank. I oversee the analytic and policy program related to urbanization, spatial development, and economic competitiveness. The reason cities do well is because they're livable, they're connected, and they're affordable. But in Africa, what's happening is that the development of African cities is going on a different trajectory. They tend to be crowded, disconnected, and costly, both for families and for workers. And therefore, you don't see such a close link between economic transformation and urbanization in Africa. In fact, now with the decline in oil and commodity prices, cities could be and can be a solution for future development, but they need to be managed well. If you were to look at African cities or study African cities 10 years ago, you wouldn't very much know how land is allocated in terms of infrastructure, housing, or commerce. But today, satellites have provided us a whole new way of looking at African cities. And the research we've been doing at the World Bank for the past 3 years puts together information from satellites along with information from censuses to tell you where the jobs are located in a city, where the housing is built in a city, and where the infrastructure is. And what we did is that when we analyzed these patterns across 20 African cities, we were surprised that these investment patterns weren't really spatially coordinated. And what we also found that this lack of coordination was increasing costs to businesses and costs to families. And at the underlying all these processes were not only the lack of investments in infrastructure, etc., but the dysfunctionality in the workings of fundamental markets on how land was used, how land is valued, how land transfers across users and users. Linked to that was problems in how people get to work in terms of mobility solutions, but also how products are moved between rural and urban areas in terms of transportation costs. If you do the right kinds of policies, you're going to get a double dividend, both in terms of growth and in terms of environment protection. Take, for example, the fundamental issue of what drives urban productivity. The core idea is scale and density. Density allows people to interact with each other, allows workers to get to firms, and allow firms to connect to other firms. But it is that same density that, if well managed, reduces the carbon footprint of reduces emissions, reduces the carbon footprint, and in fact, productivity increases go hand in hand with environment sustainability. Africa has about 470 million people in cities today. That number is going to double. At the same time, African cities aren't really creating the jobs in terms of industrial development, in terms of service sector, that have any scale economies. Most of the jobs in African cities are in the informal sector, are in small-scale activities. Part of the problem that we have to address is how do we get scale economies in production, both through policies that have to do with land use, zoning, etc., but policies that have to do with human capital accumulation. But a broader issue that faces African cities is some of the key constraints may not have to do only with the city level. A lot of national policy distortions exist, and Africa's growth till now has been one dominated by factor accumulation. Commodity prices, oil prices have all contributed to that. But today we have a bit of a window where commodity prices are declining, and African countries are looking for new sources of growth that have to do with productivity. This is where cities come in. And cities come in because they provide the ability to cluster activities that can provide the springboard for economic diversification. We don't know what these activities would be, but we sure know they require human capital and they require coordination and economic density.